Okay, so like when we think about JFK, right, it's always the assassination, the grassy knoll, the conspiracies. But there's this whole other world, kind of a secret world, that's coming into focus now thanks to some recently released files. And it has to do with, well, U.S. intelligence, espionage, all that cloak and dagger stuff during the Cold War.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot of files here, over 63,000 pages of government records related to Kennedy's assassination, all just made public.
63,000, that's a huge document dump.
It is, and it all comes from the U.S. National Archives and Records Administration, following an executive order from a few years back.
Right, right. And I mean, my first thought, anytime you hear JFK files, you got to think conspiracy.
Of course,
Of
yeah.
course. But going through all this, and we've really been digging deep, it seems like the real story here, maybe not so much about who shot JFK, but more about what these documents tell us about, well, like you said, U.S. espionage, spying and all that, especially during such a tense time globally.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there's this other layer to it, too, almost an unintended consequence of making all this stuff public. We're talking about people's personal data, private information getting exposed.
Whoa, okay, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. So
Okay.
we've got kind of like a two-sided story here. On one hand, peeking behind the curtain, CIA activities, all that. But then on the other hand, the real-world impact of, declassifying this stuff and what happens when things that were supposed to be kept secret get out.
Exactly. Two sides of the same coin, I guess you could say.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what's in these files, let's set the scene a little. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen JFK files, right? There have been releases before this.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, the vast majority of documents related to the assassination were already public. We're talking over 6 million pages.
6 million.
6 million. Yeah, so this batch, it's about 2,200 files. A lot of them were heavily redacted before, meaning parts were blacked out, kept secret.
Ah, so this is like the stuff that they really didn't want us to see before.
You could say that.
And this whole release, this wasn't just some random decision to suddenly open up the vault, right?
Yeah.
There was a process for this, a plan in place.
Right. So back in the 90s, there was a federal mandate put in place. Basically, it said all documents related to the assassination got to be gathered up, put in the National Archives, and the goal was to have them all public by 2017. Unless, of course, the president at the time said, nope, not releasing these.
So some presidential power to keep things under wraps if they wanted to?
Exactly.
Which brings us to this recent release. But even with all these documents now out there, it sounds like there's still stuff we haven't seen.
That's right. Researchers and the FBI, they're saying there's still about 3,700 files being held back.
Still classified.
Yep. And just as a little side note, that executive order that led to all this, it also covered any remaining documents related to the assassinations of Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., too.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't just JFK stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to these 63,000 pages. Decades they were secret, then suddenly, boom, they're out there. What was the reaction like? I can only imagine the internet went crazy.
Oh, you better believe it. The internet was abuzz. No surprise there. And yeah, it basically fueled a whole new wave of speculation. All the old conspiracy theories got a fresh coat of paint. It's almost like a tradition at this point. Anytime anything new comes out about JFK.
Yeah, the conspiracy machine just kicks into overdrive.
Yeah.
But what about the experts? Historians, people who've dedicated their careers to studying JFK and the assassination. What did they think of all this new information?
Well, the interesting thing is, most of them didn't seem to change their minds about the big picture. Lee Harvey Oswald, lone gunman, that still seems to be the prevailing theory. I was reading about this author, Philip Shannon. He's written a lot on the assassination. And even he said the chase for the truth will go on forever, I suspect.
So no big bombshells, no earth-shattering revelations, at least not yet.
Yeah, seems like it. But even if the main story remains the same, that doesn't mean the release was without its problems.
Oh, right. I did hear there were some issues, some criticisms about the whole thing.
Yeah, big time. Scholars, researchers, even just history buffs, they were saying the whole thing was chaotic, rushed. They basically just dumped this mountain of documents on everyone with no real way to sort through it all, no index, no search tools, nothing.
So basically like trying to find a specific email in your inbox, but your inbox has 63,000 messages all jumbled up.
Haha, yeah, pretty much. There's this historian, Larry Sabato, from the University of Virginia. He called the whole thing sloppy, even joked about lawyers pulling all-nighters trying to figure out what was what.
So it sounds like, yeah, not the smoothest rollout.
Not at all. And it wasn't just the organization that was a problem. The content of some of the files also raised some eyebrows.
Oh, okay. What do you mean?
Well, two things, mainly. First, Some of the files, they had stuff in there from after the 60s, which seems kind of weird, right? Like, what does this have to do with JFK?
Yeah, if it's supposed to be JFK files, why is there stuff from later on?
Exactly. But the bigger issue, and this was a serious one, was that they accidentally released some really sensitive personal information. We're talking social security numbers, addresses, stuff like that.
Wait, so they like doxed people
Yeah.
in these JFK
It's
files?
sickly, yeah. Inadvertently, but still.
Oh, man. That's got to be a nightmare for anyone whose information got out there. I mean, what was the reaction like?
People were understandably furious. There was this former legal counsel, Joseph DeGenova. His personal information was in there, related to some work he did with a Senate committee back in the 70s. He's actually planning to sue the National Archives over this. Called the whole thing a mess, said it was the work of incompetent people.
Wow. Yeah, I can't blame him for being angry. So, in trying to shed light on history, they ended up exposing people's private lives. Not great. What did the White House have to say about all this?
Yeah, not a good look. They did come out and acknowledge the mistake, said they're working on a plan to help those affected, offering things like credit monitoring, even new social security numbers for those whose info got leaked. They're still trying to figure out exactly how many people were impacted.
Well, hopefully they can fix things for those folks. So let's shift gears a bit back to the historical side of things. You mentioned earlier that this release, despite the mess, has been really valuable for historians, especially those studying the Cold War and the CIA. What's so special about these files for them?
Okay, so while the details about the assassination itself might not have changed much, these documents are giving us an unprecedented look at what was going on behind the scenes, especially within the CIA during that time.
Ah, so we're moving from who killed JFK to what was the CIA up to?
Exactly.
Do you have a good example of something that really stands out, some key revelation from the files?
Yeah, there's this one document that's really fascinating. It's basically a warning that Kennedy got after the Bay of Pigs invasion, which, if you remember, was that disastrous attempt to overthrow Castro in Cuba, a real low point for the CIA, and it definitely shook Kennedy's trust in them. So anyway, after that whole debacle, one of Kennedy's top advisors basically told him that the CIA had become too powerful, too much influence.
Okay, so a president basically being told, hey, your own intelligence agency, yeah, they're getting a little too big for their britches. That's got to be a tough pill to swallow. What did they suggest doing about it?
Well, get this. The advisor proposed a pretty radical solution. He said, take away all clandestine activities from the CIA, give that power to the State Department, essentially break up the CIA as it was.
Wow, that's a huge EE change, like completely restructuring U.S. intelligence. Who was this advisor making such a bold suggestion?
It was Arthur Schlesinger Jr., a special assistant to Kennedy. And here's the kicker. The full memo he wrote outlining this whole plan hadn't been released before. Earlier versions were redacted. And in this full version, there's this line that's really eye-opening. Schlesinger says that 47%, almost half of political officers in U.S. embassies, were actually controlled by the CIA.
47%. That's insane. It's like every other person you meet at an embassy is secretly working for the CIA.
It really shows you the extent of their power and influence back then.
So did Kennedy actually go through with this? Did he dismantle the CIA like his advisor suggested?
No, in the end, he didn't act on Schlesinger's advice. But as this historian, Timothy Naftali, who's actually writing a book on JFK right now, he pointed out these files give us a deeper understanding of U.S. intelligence operations under Kennedy than we have for any other president. He called it remarkable, being able to peek into this secret world.
It really is remarkable. It also highlights the tension between, needing to keep intelligence stuff secret and wanting to understand our own history.
Definitely.
So big picture, what are your main takeaways from all of this?
For me, the biggest thing is, while a lot of people hoped these files would finally solve the JFK assassination, they haven't really changed the main story. What they have done is shown just how complex and messy it is to declassify historical records, especially when you accidentally release personal information, which, yikes. But on a positive note, they've also given us an incredible look at the CIA during the Cold War, their operations, their power struggles, all of that. It's like a window into this whole secret world that we're just now starting to understand.
It's amazing, right? All these mysteries, all this history hidden away for decades.
Exactly.
So the mystery of JFK's death might continue, but we're getting a clearer picture of another kind of mystery. The inner workings of U.S. intelligence during one of the most tense periods in history.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And it all leaves us with a big question, a question for everyone listening, really. How do we balance wanting to know our history with the need for national security, and the right to privacy? How do we decide what secrets to keep and what secrets to reveal? It's a debate that's going to keep going as more and more of these historical documents come to light.
That's a great point, and something for all of us to think about.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, that's all the time we have for this deep dive, but keep those questions coming, and we'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious.